Five, two, one. Excellent. We are live. Welcome to Revolution Health. This is Dr. Jason Dean, and I am here with somebody who I actually never met. I know of him from a distance through another friend, but I'm actually really excited because the world that I work in, natural health, not only am I a chiropractor, but I work in nutrition. I do muscle testing, nutrition response testing, and I work with the land, with natural laws, with how our earth is. And so anytime I can get a farmer or somebody who knows the land and farming, it's always a joy for me. So tonight I have Eric Fuchs with me. Eric, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being on.
Well, I'm excited to be here. It's really neat. Thank you.
Absolutely. And he is on the road because he has a couple jobs. He is in water by day and farm 24 hours a day, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. So as we have viewers, we have practitioners who watch this, we have just public who watch this, who are trying to take care of their health. Give everyone a little background. You have a multitude of backgrounds, your education, your experience, but give everyone a little background on everything that you do in your education.
Okay, good. So I've farmed all my life. We've got about 1,000 acres in southeast Missouri and the Ozarks, where we raise cattle and sheep. We raise livestock. I've got the formal education from the University of Missouri in soils, graduated in 1994, and I've been spending the last 25 years trying to unlearn everything that I learned in college that was the typical conventional agriculture thing. So then about 5 years ago, I started working at a job called Missouri Rural Water Association as a source water technician. So I spend time with systems all around the state, helping them protect their drinking water. And these two things have really kind of melded together, because what I have found is the majority of the problems in drinking water are because of agriculture, poor agriculture practices. About 5 years ago, I started getting in what's called holistic management and soil health, and really have just in the last 5 years have probably learned more than I have in all my life on where farming really can go, and how to take care of the soil and how to grow good food, and how it all ties together. And to make it even crazier is about a year ago, I married a chiropractor who is also advanced nutrition response testing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And then of course met you, and here we are.
Absolutely. You're street smart, I would say, right?
I like to think I am. Yeah, I've got the formal education, but the street smart is where really I think has brought me into a different realm of, hey, just able to look and say, this makes sense, this works.
Yeah, and I want to dive in and get a little background from you, because as we go in tonight, we'll talk about many different aspects, from the soil to the water to farming, etc. But you've obviously seen this big disconnection between our bodies, our society, and in the land itself. And I'm sure you see that every day. Give us some examples on how you see that, whether it's water, whether it's the land itself, or even just, farming and raising animals.
Well, it's funny, because 50, 60 years ago, the dynamics of the farming has changed so much. And when I talk about soil health and doing different things in agriculture, this is not new technology. It's the stuff we did pre-industrial fertilizers, chemicals, things like that. And a lot of these little farms had a synergistic system of, they had a little row crop ground, they had some hogs, they had some chickens, they had some cows, they raised gardens, they ate what they produced. And then we slowly got away from that when commercial fertilizers came out. People didn't know how to work the land. They didn't know how the technology used all they've known is fertilizers and chemicals. So you've really seen a shift. And in the last 10 years, probably 10 to 15 years, with the advent of GMOs, we've seen another wholesale switch. And so on farms now, and it's not to take away from the local guy that's driving the tractor or raising the cattle, but all the technology is given, everything he's provided his information from has just been a completely different realm. And it's gone to a lot of medications, a lot of chemicals, a lot of fertilizers, and they're just disconnected from the land. They grow a commodity now, mainly corn and beans, and just aren't connected to it anymore. And it's nothing more than that just seems the way that all the big corporations have kind of pushed it and kind of pushed them, and they're more now just employees of corporations instead of farmers anymore. And I know that's a blanket statement. I feel bad about saying it sometimes, but you see a lot of them just don't have the zeal and the energy and the desire to do what they used to do 40, 50, 60 years ago.
And that makes sense. It's fascinating. So I'm more of a libertarian mindset, hence the shirt.
and I am right there with you.
and I understand you are as well. And I do want to delineate too, and I know you would as well, that there's this big difference between business, companies, small business, and then this corporate agricultural beast that really isn't out for the goodwill and helping a customer. It's profits over health. It's profits over people. It's different things like that. And it's kind of how that whole agricultural thing spun out of control. And you see that daily, I'm assuming.
We do. You know, everything in agriculture is not quality driven. It's quantity driven. You know, when you talk to another farmer, you don't say, hey, man, I've grown a corn crop that had some of the best energy value or the best quality for food ever. No, it's I've grown 200 bushel to the acre. And you do see it with corporate. It's gotten so big. You know, I was raised where we saved our own seeds. We saved our bean seeds. We saved our wheat seeds. And then it just kind of shifted. And the shift seemed good at the time. It saved time. It seemed to save money. But what it does, it sucks everybody in. And now, once again, the actual farmer doing the work gets such a small percentage of the overall profit. And you see it in both, you know, hogs and chickens are now mainly confined. You know, they're not raised on farm like they used to be. They are farmers that raise them, but it's the animals themselves are owned by big corporations. And even with the cattle, why they can't control the cow-calf operation, they control packing. So it's hard for a guy to raise a grass-fed beef and try to compete with them when he pays $450 to get his processed, and the big companies pay $50 to get theirs processed. So it's really, you really have to take a hard look at it and see kind of how insidious it is from the top down. And again, you know, the guy that's working the land is the one that ends up failing, and the consumers with the food supplies now. You know, the food supplies, I mean, look around. Look at your guys' business. You know, it's not hard to look around and see that our health is failing and failing fast.
It makes total sense. And I always like to play devil's advocate a little bit. So I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, as everyone knows, or as I call it, conspiracy realist, because it's really happening. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're getting as much data and actual facts as possible. And when you're dealing with companies, whether in the genetically modified world like Monsanto, which is now Bayer, et cetera, when it first started, do you feel like there was an actual like underhanded stealth strategic way of actually making people sicker? Or do you believe that they really were trying to find a good system and now it's kind of just spiraled out of control? Because a lot of people just want to go, okay, they're evil, they're bad, they're doing this to hurt everybody. But then we do want to take a step back and go, okay, were they trying to accomplish something? And then obviously we just kind of spun out of control with it.
You know, well, that's a hard one too, because I tend to lean to the conspiracy theory stuff and the cynical. You know, I think a lot of it, I like to think that they didn't set out to say, here, we're going to ruin people's health, but they did set out to control something, control food supply or control a market. And, you know, when you look at GMOs by themselves, you look at glyphosate and Roundup by themselves, maybe they're not that bad. But when you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, it seems like where things really, really kind of fall by the wayside. So, you know, do I think somebody was sitting 20 years ago in a lab saying, you know, we're going to try to do this? I don't know, but definitely it has come that direction. And it seems like the biggest thing is the realm of control, being able to control all the seeds, the food supply, and the money that comes along with it. I mean, you control our food and the way we grow it, and you control a lot of things.
Now, on a farm, I grew up a little bit on a farm, but it was mostly a dairy farm. Now, in your world and your farm, are you both raising cattle as well as growing food, or do you focus that more towards raising cattle? And do farmers try to go one direction with it, or do they try to do combinations?
You know, for the most part, and that's what's happened. You know, it wasn't that many years ago when people, you know, raised a little bit of everything, but now it's so one way. Either people are raising livestock or they're row croppers. And you know, ourselves just raise livestock. We don't raise any crops. And at this point, we still just sell in the commodity market. When I say that, we just take it to a sale barn and sell it. We're not selling to individuals because it's hard and a lot of work and sometimes not that profitable to try to sell. But for the most part, they aren't diversified like they used to be. And diversity, nature loves diversity, but I think communities love diversity too. What I have seen when you go around our state and my other job, all these little rural towns were built on agriculture. They all had a couple of feed stores, and they all market. And like I said, people raised a few chickens, they raised some beef, they raised hogs, and they raised a little crop. It's not like that anymore. You've got farms that are gigantic, 10, 15,000 acres. You go across rural America and you see all these old homestead and all these old houses. And I'm not just right out against big business or people getting bigger or people expanding if they can, as long as it's not the detriment of other things. And I think that's what it's had. We've lost rural America and rural communities that we used to have, 30, 40 years ago.
Sure. And that makes sense. Totally see how that happens. Now, as we dive into, I want to go into a little bit of the soil before we jump in the water, because I know people are definitely curious about that water, and that's a whole massive subject. But from a soil standpoint, what I've researched, and I tend to stick with very traditional, I like to say old-fashioned. It's not really old-fashioned, it's just true data from a standpoint of the soil and nutrition. And, I work with organic whole food supplements. You know about that world as well. The soil today, I mean, we're showing 50, 60 years ago, it was deficient. It was missing nutrients. It was just low, and the food was changing and it was different, which obviously then translates to an unhealthier population because they're just not getting what they need. Talk to us a little bit about the soil quality today that you see and how that translates over to the human health aspect.
The soil quality is all but gone. And we see it from a carbon standpoint, organic matter or humus. And, in the last 20 years, with no diversification, no ground cover, we just grow corn and beans, and we go back and forth. The crop rotation now is considered corn and beans. And it used to be you'd have some alfalfa or legume or wheat, and you constantly kept the ground covered. But we have mined these soils out so much. We've mined them with micronutrients probably ages ago, and now we've mined out with macronutrients. So the soil is almost just a medium to hold the plant up anymore. And again, we'll talk about the water here in a little bit, but we get so much soil loss now and so much nutrient loss. You've got the dead zone in the Gulf, but as far as it is what it grows, for the plant to feed the animal, there's not much there anymore. And we see it, and it's, we've mined them out. There is nothing there. And that's why we can just grow the things we grow with all the inputs. And you keep having I always say soil nitrogen use is like a coke head or a meth head. You constantly, the more you use, the more you have to continue to use. And that's what we've done with our soils. We've completely worn them out.
And that makes total sense from a farming standpoint. Now, you can go as deep into this as you want, or you can summarize as much as you want, but I know that there's a word monocropping today, which is very well known, and that's kind of the soy, the corn, the grain, that whole GMO aspect. What is the proper way to farm? Like, what have we forgotten? What, and not necessarily forgotten, but what have we just completely disregarded at this point? Like, how does a season change from a standpoint of, growing vegetables or growing grains, whatever it may be?
If there's one word I can come to, it's that word diversity. And that's what we've lost is and even 40 or 50 years ago, we didn't have as much, but what we're seeing, we're learning things now that we didn't even know were possible in soils by bringing back diversity. And instead of just growing a corn plant, and people knew this in gardens for years, they planted marigolds beside their tomatoes, or they planted the three sisters. I think it was corn and squash and beans, and one would grow up the other. And it's all this synergistic of the one and one does not make two in nature. One and one can make 4 or 5. So you grow 12, 13 species together. The corn plant may need some nitrogen, so when this other plant's going and making nitrogen and bring it up to it, and it may need potassium, and it's this interaction with plants. And so what we've lost out is that diversity. And when you bring that diversity back, you actually start growing more soil, or you get soils that are in balance now, so you don't have a nematode problem or a pest problem or a bug problem, because everything we do in agriculture now is a Band-Aid. You know, fungicides, pesticides, herbicides. You know what side means? Side means kill. And everything we do in agriculture is to kill. It is, yeah. Suicide, homicide, pesticide, they're all means to kill something. And everything we're taught in agriculture is to kill. And this whole movement now that I've learned and been around farming all my life and never even knew, it's more of a, okay, how can we counteract it? How can we plant more species to have this diversity to help each species out to grow? It's so different than what we're used to and what we've known in agriculture. But you talk about exciting, and to be able to actually grow soil. We were taught that it took thousands of years to grow soil. We're seeing people, you know, increase their organic matter 1, 2, 3, 4% in 6, 7 years. I mean, things that we never knew were possible.
Wow. This is the fascinating part about studying that you must all do, is know your words and understand them, because I tend to like vocabulary. It's fun for me and I enjoy spelling, but I did not know side was kill, which you just kind of blew my mind. So now I take a whole different viewpoint of this, but also interesting because your world, they're focusing on killing, obviously not you, but also in my world, we had this thing called an antibiotic, which everyone thinks is just the cure for everything, which they'll throw it at a virus, at a parasite, even though they don't know it only will kill a bacteria. But on top of that, you're killing your whole landscape internally in your gut as well, because it kills anything in its path. And so it's very fascinating because we're drawing this conclusion and this connection between gut health, but also planetary and earth health, because we are a symbiotic relationship with our planet, with our earth.
And that's what has been so exciting when I start talking to my wife, Leanne, about nutrition response. I'm like, oh my gosh, this ties together so crazy. I was just at a farm conference the other day, and I bet over half the folks there weren't farm backgrounds. And you would ask them how they found out about this. And well, we were doing some research on gut health, and all of a sudden we roll into soil health. And it all ties together. And like I said, what we're taught in farming, if we have one pest that we're trying to get rid of, well, we don't have a chemical that kills that one pest. We kill everything out there. We kill all that diversity and nature. The reason a bare field grows up in weeds is because nature hates bare ground, or it hates nothing there. And so that's its way of healing the wounds. And we just constantly beat her down and beat her down and beat her down with all these things, just like we do our bodies. Like you're saying, the soil health and gut health are closely related. It just blows your mind.
It's fascinating because down in Florida here, we have this obsession with making sure our grass looks absolutely beautiful. And my wife and I, and it's funny because it's Bermuda down here. It's that really thick, high grass, which I actually don't even like because it's very uncomfortable to walk in. But the fascinating part is my wife and I live in an older house, and we've literally never touched our lawn. And I live on about a half acre. And so it's a good sized lawn for down here. Like, we have a good backyard, everything else. We've never done anything to our ground. And our grass looks absolutely perfect in all areas, minus where the trees are and dump a lot of different stuff. But then you see down here, if you just drive down the street, you have a pest control vehicle like on every corner spraying, yet every season it comes around, you hear about the pest control people saying, oh, we got to kill this fungus. This pest is back and it's killing grass here, and this is back and it's killing this. And it's fascinating to me because you hear all these things that they have to kill constantly because something's killing the grass. So they have to spray it and treat it. Yet I've never done anything to my yard, and the thing grows beautifully. I have got me.
Are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, gotcha.
But, I don't even know why that happened. It just was really quick and it came back on. But interesting because we have an ecosystem in our yard. I mean, we have frogs all over the place, salamanders, lizard, you name it. And our vegetables grow great. I never even have to treat them with anything. I never even have to help them with anything. But yet you have these other people spraying and everything's dying and all the pests are terrible.
Yeah. And it's funny. We are taught, and it's Same way with farmers. You know, you go by a beautiful cornfield or a bean field, and there's always stories about sending the kids all the way out in the middle of the field to pull a weed because the weed's out there, and you didn't want your neighbors to see it. And same same thing with the lawns. We have to change our mindset of what we think is beauty. And now I can walk out into a field that may be crazy with weeds, and even new. I walk out, I'm like, oh man, this looks terrible. But then you turn cows in there, and that's the first thing they eat. Or you start looking around and there's these insects and bugs and different stuff, and we spend millions of dollars trying to bring back the monarch, but then we spray the roadsides and kill all the milkweed, because of the law, like in Missouri, you have to spray Johnson grass on the roadsides per federal law because it's considered a noxious weed. And it's insanity the way we do things. If you would just, like you said, step back and look at maybe what you're trying to accomplish here and look at a different way of doing things. But it's really hard for people to stop and see something different.
Interesting. And so that helps me transition into this water thing, because this topic, if you asked me 10 plus years ago if I'd ever be involved in water on a daily basis, I would never have guessed I was, but it's becoming so toxic at this point. Give everyone a little background on what you're seeing today, because I mean, this is your job. This is what you do. I mean, you're on the road right now because your job sends you for water, and you're in the Midwest, and obviously Midwest is having a major problem right now, flooding and water, everything else. Give us a background on water systems and what you deal with, because I know it's so toxic at this point. And I only scratch the surface. You're obviously the expert, but give everyone a little bit of background on that.
Well, to give a little background on me, first, I'm a certified water operator, and I work in what's called source water protection. So I'm the guy that works to try to keep communities' water clean before it's treated. And to be honest with you, most of the technology is always put to how do we take dirty water and make it clean instead of just how to keep it clean in the first place. But having the farm background and then starting working in water quality, I really venture to say that agriculture creates, boy, I'm just throwing a number out there, but the majority of our water quality issues. I mean, we have areas where there's fracking or there's mines or different stuff like that. For the most part, though, it's a matter of, and it's so easily fixed, but it's a matter of soil moving with the herbicides and the chemicals with it that cause things like the dead zone, which is a great big problem, where you have little water systems that have groundwater contaminated by nitrates or the different chemicals. And I can blanketly say the majority of it all is caused by poor farming practices. And when I say that, it's poor, it's so easily fixed. If you get your soil in good shape and you always have a living plant or a living root growing on that, then nothing leaves. I always say, I don't care what you do on your ground, just make sure it doesn't leave there. And when you get all this in good shape, water and the nutrients don't leave. We create our own floods. We create our own droughts. All these floods you see are normally created because there is no water holding capacity in the soil. Every 1% organic matter in the soil will hold 25,000 gallons of water. So these prairie soils that you see out west in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas used to be 8-10% organic matter. Now they're 1% or less. So you do that math. So for each acre of ground, we're losing, let's say, the ability to hold 150,000 gallons of water. Now you take that across the whole Midwest, there's your floods. Wow. There's your droughts. Because soil is made to take water in and then release it when it's dry or when it's needed. So how does that tie into my clean water? All those materials that are on the farm grounds are coming down and coming in either via the groundwater, or a lot of places use what's called surface water, a lake or a reservoir. And so all the technology is how do we get that water clean now to put it out the door? And, I talked to Leanne, my wife, about chlorine and chloramines. Chlorine is a necessary evil. You either die immediately from a bad disease or you die slowly because you have to put chlorine in the water. So to sit here and say I'm a fan of any of that, absolutely not. But because we have screwed stuff up so bad, that's the only way we can deal with the problems with water to make it to where it is somewhat what I would call safe for consumption.
It's so fascinating you said that, because for years and years, I mean, obviously in my office, we even test for that, and people test with chlorines and chloramines. in their system and it's toxic. And I used to just hammer on like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And I actually met someone probably a couple months ago as well, not with your background, but a little bit of background in the water system. And he basically said the same thing. He's like, we don't like it, but if we don't do it, you're going to have a much bigger problem on your hands. And so for you actually to, to back that up, that's it's unfortunate, but now I understand more why that's happening. And I appreciate you telling that to everybody, because I think everyone is in a similar situation I am. We don't have the background on this. And so to us, we're like, you can't put chlorine in the water. But as you're saying, if you don't, there's a much bigger problem on our hands.
Yes. And you see countries where they have cholera and they die immediately, or E. coli or something like that. And one thing I would point out, though, that a lot of people don't know is the difference between chlorine and chloramines. So chlorine, if you take a glass of water with chlorine and you want to put it on the counter and let it sit there for a while, the chlorine will gas off.
Okay.
It will go away. The whole reason they use chloramines, which is chlorine combined with ammonia, is so it'll last longer. So these big, huge water systems, they're required by federal law to have what's called a residual, which is a fancy word for so much chlorine way out in the system, saying, hey, I'm still getting my disinfectant out there. Well, chlorine, because of its gas off, wouldn't get there. So they start using chloramines where it can last way into the systems. But the whole idea now, I can't set my glass of water and let it gas off. So that's why you probably in your guys' profession see more of a problems with chloramines than chlorines, and the reason is because it's doing what it's supposed to do in the water system. It just doesn't leave as quick. So
now from a chemical standpoint, because I know that, and I don't know all the background in this, so you can probably better educate me on this as well, but I know not everyone does fluoride, I believe, but obviously we know some of the issues behind fluoride, but also now we have nanoparticles, I believe, of different medications. So everything from birth control pills to antidepressants. What do you see in that world? Is that something you deal with?
Well, first of all, with fluoride, one thing I am saying that I really like is that majority of systems are getting away from fluoride. You see less and less systems, and I think it's lots because it's a public impact. It's not something that is, at least in Missouri, it's not something that's required or state law. Now, pharmaceuticals, and as many may not know, there is no treatment for pharmaceuticals in drinking water. There is nothing that's required by law or even technology out there that I know of that actually takes pharmaceuticals out of drinking water. So yes, antibiotics, hormones, psychotropic, you're going to get those, because they go right into the wastewater. And whether we like to think it's neat or not, wastewater ends up being drinking water one time or another, depending on how it's, somebody's outtake on a river may be right above somebody's intake later on. But even in groundwater, I live in a real pristine area of the Ozarks, and they've done some testing on deep aquifers down there. And guess what? They find hormones, antibiotics, things like that. A lot of that probably comes from the ag sector too, but a huge portion of it comes from, individuals. Because it's funny. I say I also do a prescription drug take back program, do my job, and you've seen the statistics on Americans and the amount of drugs we take, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
but none of that is taken out of water.
It's very scary. I totally understand. It's in the things that we've learned is, you can have a woman on birth control, but she's urinating out. Eric had to run. He'll be right back.
My alarm went off.
That's okay.
My seventh time alarm.
But people are taking these medications. You have a female who might be taking birth control, and that's then being urinated into the system, and it can't be picked up. And then, we have, I don't know the stat off the top of my head. I've looked it up before, but we're getting close to no less than 50% of the country on psychotropics. And so that's also you're getting urinated out through because their system's not holding it all. And that's all slow dosing into people with any city water supply. My wife and I, when we first bought our house, my wife only had a couple different things that it was mandatory in buying our house. And one of them was a well. And we were able to find one. And luckily ours is clean, because not every one of them is still clean, because the aquifer is becoming toxified as well. But to try to find that clean water, are there any filters out there? Are there anything that people can actually pick up on the market that is anywhere strong enough to pull any of this stuff out?
Yeah. And And it's funny because you hear a lot about Flint, Michigan, and lead, and that's the least of people's concerns in the big picture. I mean, I'm not, there's a lot of aging infrastructure and a lot of stuff falling apart, but it's this other stuff, in my opinion, that's probably going to be, and you're probably going to see it regulated more by EPA in the future, but I don't know how quick that's going to be. But it definitely is a concern, and really, everybody asks this a lot. A good old charcoal filter is about as good as you'll get to take out a lot of stuff. And I'm not real familiar with medications and stuff, but like farm chemicals, atrazine. I'm not positive about Roundup, but a good old charcoal filter is about as good as it gets.
Wow. And the water, I mean, you must have to honestly stay on the water situation, education daily. I mean, it must change constantly.
That's the hardest thing, is people, even the farmers, they don't realize they're creating a problem. I mean, because to be honest with you, water operators do a very good job meeting the standards of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And because we can have so much nitrates in drinking water, you can have some atrazine in drinking waters. The bar is not set at zero, which I think would be the correct way to have it. But so for the most part, these operators do an excellent job meeting the standards with the different chemicals they use then to get that stuff out of water. But I try to just preach as much on the other side because people are getting a lot more educated. There's a lot of radicals on each end of the spectrum, but people are a lot more educated on the chlorines, the chloramines, what's going on. And while it does create some misery in our world because of a lot of the wackos, as I would say, that we get calls, about things, at the same time, I like to see people getting more educated and asking more questions on, what is in our water, how is it treated, and we like to give as many people tours of water plants, and I would entertain you guys or anybody around to go see actually how it's done, so then they really get a reality on what needs to be done to make it better.
What is your suggestion to people? We hear everything from distilled to reverse osmosis to just filtered. What do you actually suggest is the best that people can do to clean it up as much as possible?
Leanne and I use a good old charcoal filter.
Okay.
And I think that's about as good as anything. I think people go to bottled water, but bottled water is coming out of some municipal water supply somewhere. And but a good charcoal filter is probably about as good as it gets from my experience on making water good to drink.
That makes sense. And the one thing I can add to that is a lot of people will swear by the reverse osmosis. And yes, you're taking a lot of stuff out. But one of the biggest things people mess up with reverse osmosis is you got to put minerals back in. Our water actually is supposed to have minerals in it. We get these water systems. I'm at a well, and if you let water continue to build up, you'll actually have a calcification ring or sometimes a little high iron or color to it. And actually, if you go back and look into the research, the nutrition research, that was a good thing. Our body actually can use those minerals. And everyone, and I think you probably see this too, if someone does not see total clear liquid coming out of their faucet, it's a problem. They want total clear, and yet water really does have, it has some density to it.
Yeah, and that's the first thing people see. If they see a taste and odor problem, then it's got to be bad. And unfortunately, that everybody used to drink out of cisterns and had systems that could take it. So from my standpoint, it's the chemicals and things like that would more concern me than little iron, little floaters, as they call them in there.
You're wondering what you're drinking, but it's probably okay.
Exactly. I'm from a farm, so some of the stuff we drank when you're thirsty, probably not real good.
We used to drink right out of the spigot in the backyard.
Exactly.
That's how it was done. I want to dive into from an environmental standpoint, because when people hear me talk, if they don't know me, some people think I'm like a crazy liberal. Some people think I'm a crazy like Republican, and I'm kind of just down the middle, because I want to save my environment and I want to keep it clean. But I also know that we have to allow a justice system to work. If people mess up the land, then they have to be held accountable for it. But from a land standpoint, the biggest thing on the horizon right now is everything is, well, it started with global warming. Now it's considered climate change, and it keeps kind of turning the more they want to do certain things. And they want to do carbon taxes and everything else. And we're carbon-based beings. We are carbon as it is. So it's very hard to say that carbon is bad for everybody, because that's what we are. Now, my take when I look at this, I look at, yes, maybe weather is changing, maybe it's not, I don't know, maybe temperatures are changing, I know there's cycles, but the biggest thing I think is not necessarily that we're causing it as humans being on the planet, but more of we toxify, I guess is the best word to say, our environment so much. And as you were saying, I mean, the floods alone, I mean, you know, they're saying the floods, this catastrophic thing, and it's global warming. But in reality, the science behind it is we're just changing our environment in such a poor way, we might actually be changing the weather.
Yeah, you've hit on a really passionate one with me. You know, first of all, I think caring for your environment, if we're going to label something, should be one of the most conservative movements there ever is, whether you look at religion or politics or anything else. Caring for the environment should never be political. I be one way or the other. Everybody care for the environment. You know, and I'm like you. I hear the next greatest term of global warming or whatever, and I want to roll my eyes, because they politicize something, and then when you confuse people, you get inaction. So people don't know whether it's getting warmer, it's getting colder, the ice caps are melting. But from Eric Fuchs' personal standpoint, I think we are very capable of changing our weather patterns. And I can see it. I can do it on my own little 1,000 acres. If you know, we talked about the soil health. If I increase organic matter, and I can hold 25,000 gallons more an acre, and I get a rain, well, it doesn't run off as much. So if I can hold, or if I have plants growing there and not bare ground, I can hold more. We changed the entire weather pattern of a country during the Dust Bowls by plowing up the prairie. I mean, we know we can do it. But at the same time, Mother Nature is so resilient, just like our bodies, but she can only take so much. And we toxic, put so much toxic in it, we can't undo it. But from my standpoint, again, Eric's opinion, I don't blame coal plants, I don't blame cars, and I don't blame farting cows. I blame what we have done with our soils. We have, if you look at the research, more carbon has come out of our soils in the last 100 years than all the rest of it put together. You can take a landmass, there's some good research on this and holistic management, you can take a landmass about the size of Australia and up the organic matters in those soils 1 or 2% and sequester enough of carbon to get us back in where we were in the pre-industrial revolution. You know, but you never hear about that. You know, there's a lot of good data out there about changing land use practices and then changing rainfall patterns. We no doubt have these crazy rainfalls now where you get 8-9 inch deluges at a time. And that's from the land use patterns. You know, when you have an entire country with nothing but soy and corn, but then 4 months later you have nothing growing. There is absolutely no plant, so no carbon photosynthesis going on at all. We change our patterns. So, you know, we are connected as a globe, and I'm not saying there's not other countries that are doing a lot of pollution in regards to coal plants and things, but the farming is universal around the world. How there's poor farming practices, and I think it is so simple, such simple technology to change what we're doing, and actually, to me, switch things around.
It's so simple, and they're, from a political standpoint, they're not trying to complicate it. They're simply just trying to not confront, because they want to tax you. That's really what it comes down to. They are trying to tax you, and so they're going to tell you a lie to get you taxed. Because if you look at the science, Eric's saying the science, and at the end of the day, we're carbon-based bodies, and we're a carbon-based planet. So you can't tax something that we're all made of, technically.
Yeah, and you can't. You know, when I store carbon in my soil by good farming practices, they can't tax that. You know, that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to do, and they all want to use technology. You know, we want to inject carbon into the oil wells and all this. No, I mean, the technology is already out there, just better farming practices. And again, we've learned more in the last 5 years on seeing what we can do just by small incremental changes over a great big large area. We handle floods, we handle droughts, we handled pesticides. We can use a lot less chemicals. And I'm not an anti everything in regards to chemicals and fertilizers. I'm just a fan of moderation, and we've passed that point by so long ago. I'm about, you know, using something, and if we mess up, maybe have to use a little antibiotic or a little fertilizer, and then come back again and try to do better. But we've passed that point a long time ago.
That makes 100% sense. Are you studied at all? Obviously, Joel Salatin or like Alan Savory at all?
I've met both Joe and Alan. I went to Joel's farm before, and Alan Savory is two weeks of holistic management. That was probably the, you know, if anybody can ever watch 2 TED Talks to really bring what I'm talking in perspective, one's Alan Savory's TED Talk, and the other one's a gentleman named Gabe Brown. And Gabe Brown's a farmer from North Dakota that does a lot of the stuff what I'm talking about. They're very short, about, you know how TED Talks, 15, 20 minutes, and it is the most powerful thing I've ever seen. Alan Savory is quite a man.
Yeah, I'm obviously this is not my specialty area. I'm not in it every day other than just helping people around it and educating. But I'll be honest with you, watching Alan Savory's 20 minutes TED Talk changed my world.
It's mind blowing, isn't it?
It just, and not only one, for him to admit what he did was obviously not, he at the time he thought it was right, but you know, in the killing of the elephants in Africa, but then to turn around and say, to openly admit, not only do we mess up, but I know how to fix it, and I'm going to fix it. I mean, anybody who even believes in climate change or global warming, it's a required video for you to watch, because he says out in the open, we know what it is and we can fix it. I mean, absolutely, it's mind blowing. But anybody who cares at all about the environment, that TED Talk, but also the one Eric just talked about, which is Gabe Brown, we'll put that link in the comments below as well. Now, from a water standpoint, I'm curious about something, because we're obviously a planet that's covered by a lot of water. Are there desalination methods yet that we can do from an economic standpoint to make cleaner water, since we're on a planet of water? Or is that really something that still is out in the future? We're not there yet.
You know, I don't know a lot about desalination, but it sure makes sense that this is the conspiracy part of me that comes out. You know, there's so much technology that's got to be out there. You know, we have an ocean right beside us, but yet we can't get water. You know, it's supposed to be very energy inefficient, but you know, there's got to be some kid in his mom's basement somewhere that's got to be able to get a technology to make something like that better. Now, again, I think the solution is just to keep it clean in the first place. You know, and it's really not. It's not a quantity problem. It's more of a quality problem and a usage problem. You know, California, for instance, I may get some flack for this, but it's a desert, for God's sakes. Why are we trying to farm in a desert? You know, we have rice out there. We have huge dairies out there. It's a desert, and that's a created environment. And you know, they talk water shortages out there. 75% of the water being used in California is being used by agriculture, and they were putting all the limitations on the individuals in the cities. So again, I'm not anti-farmer in this regard, but there's better ways of doing it. You know, Israel's done huge technological advances on how they do use irrigation and do use water. You know, there's instances with these cover crops that I'm talking in soil health practices where you can get rid of irrigation. So again, there's very simple technologies to get to the point to where water quantity is not a problem. We're not pumping all these reservoirs dry. So long question to a short, or long answer to a short question there.
Well, I tend to agree with you, because I know that there's already been water-based engines to run vehicles that have been created, and they figured it out, and those people all of a sudden disappeared. And I know, I mean, solar should be at this point on every single rooftop, especially in the South, yet it's outrageously expensive to get. And it's just technology. I don't know how my television that's 60 inches on the wall can go from $3,000 to $500 in a matter of a year, but yet we can't get desalination, which I believe you, and I kind of agree with you, is it's a money thing, it's a control thing, because how can my television go from $3,000 to $500 in a year, yet we can't get clean water and we can't get solar panels on all the southern states? I
mean, I've got a pocket computer right here that will do anything, but yet we can't do some other certain things. So yeah, we're in the same sheet on that.
Now, as we conclude tonight, I want to go over a little bit of your farm, because obviously this is I call it your side job, but it's obviously a full-time gig because it's got to be kept maintained. Now, what kind of cattle are you raising? Do you hear me?
We just raise regular beef cows,
Okay.
Nothing special. We raise that and what's called hair sheep, which is close to a goat. It's a sheep that you don't have to shear, and that's one of the probably biggest growing commodity in the United States, is they can't keep up with the sheep market, because a lot of folks eat like sheep. I don't myself, but like lamb. But yeah, so we just use cattle and sheep right now. And if Leanne and I are starting to do a lot more stuff on the soil health aspects and trying to do some measuring and a little bit of on-farm research to see what we can do. And the cattle are like a very, very needed thing to try to create soil by grazing and hoof, and savory goes in a lot of that, using hoof. So we're kind of using the livestock as a moneymaker to help with our soil aspect as well.
Nice. Now, do you find it? Do you feed them? Are they just free range? Do they also get some like healthier grains? How does that work on your farm? I know that obviously that can be a challenge for any farm.
It is, and like right now we've had a rough winter, and we feed a little grain right now, feed a little corn. But we for the most part we rotate cattle. You know, working on the road, it gets tough, but we try to move cattle every 2 or 3 days to a different pasture, and that's a lot of the Allen Savory thing. It's called intensive grazing, to where you can take a farm and with electric fence put it in a whole bunch of little stuff with different water source, so you're just constantly moving the cattle around, so they're not grazing the same thing every time. Really helps you with diversity, because they're not constantly grazing the plant down to where only the bad plants like Bermuda grass will survive.
Yeah. Now, one of the biggest issues from a farming standpoint is from a food standpoint. And I know a lot of people who are in this movement. I am not necessarily one of them. I am a meat eater. I enjoy my meat. I eat as much organic grass-fed as I possibly can. But there is this big movement of that it's taking too much water, too much resources to have cattle, to have, eat cattle, eat food. What is your angle on that? Because I know that when I see these arguments, what I tend to see is a lot of people having a lot of opinions, but not real hard data behind that opinion. And obviously factory farming is a whole other story. I don't condone factory farming at all, but you have places like Joel Salatin's farm where they really successfully do it all, and their water's maintained, everything's maintained. What's your take on that?
I mean, as far as the feedlot situation, a lot of things happen in agriculture because of subsidies. If you took government out of agriculture, we'd probably get much more of a balance. I think you'd see a lot less feedlots, a lot less corn and soy grown, because it's all subsidized, and it's subsidized in a lot of different directions. Ethanol, or at your tank, or you have to use so much ethanol in your blend. So the point is, a lot of those anti or beef type people, they point right to the feedlot. There is no reason. There's plenty of ground around the United States, if managed properly, that can only be used with grazing animals, and which doesn't take a lot of water, or doesn't take a lot of resources. And so, based off the system we have now, I see where they're saying, or they get a target on that and says, "Oh my gosh, that's just about the worst it can be." But a grass-based type situation, it takes longer to have grass-fed. We want it immediately. 30, 40, 50 years ago, everything was grass-fed, because that's the only way you did things. So kind of coming full circle and not answering a whole lot, but I think if you took government completely out of farming, you would not see near the factory farms, you would not see near the feedlots, because it's all subsidized one way or the other. So the government, with their farm programs, are keeping a lot of that in place just by the numbers work economically as long as there's subsidies in there. But when there's not, you go to a lot more small farms, you would get a lot more local type stuff, local butchering, maybe little local feedlots. And I think it would go back to a much more localized food system than what it is now.
Yeah, I agree. The state stated for a long time that people have no concept of what their food actually costs. If you go to the store and you think a dozen eggs really costs $2, that is a subsidized. That's essentially, it's welfare eggs. I mean, obviously you're not paying for it with welfare, food stamps, but eggs do not cost that. When I go get my eggs from, say, a free range place, I mean, I have honestly paid anywhere upwards of $10, sometimes $15 a dozen eggs. Not all the time, but people have no concept of what their food costs because the government's paying your farmers to produce it.
Yeah, and it's so out of whack, and we got subsidized crop insurance now, and that's why we have 10, 15,000 acre farms. The government programs create a lot of the problems, and the farm bill, that's one of the oldest subsidized or oldest socialized type programs around. They've been around since FDR in the late 30s. So one of the oldest subsidized programs around is the farmers.
Nice.
And it's not good for farmers.
You've been in industries, water, farming, etc., and then you stumble across your wife, who is in this healthcare thing. How has that changed your life, giving your background, what you already had in, to now entering into this holistic health field where we actually go back to our land? What's that been like for you?
It has been the neatest thing in the world. And, I don't think we've been married yet when we went and toured the Standard Process plant up in Wisconsin, and where I think you guys receive a lot of your supplements and stuff. And we're walking around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that they're doing exactly what we talk about doing. And it has been such an eye opener for both her and I, because everything, I try not to give her any propaganda, as I say, from the chemical standpoint or GMO standpoint, but I'll let her read some stuff. And it's funny because she's like, well, this is the kind of things I'm seeing in my office, the autoimmune things. And so then she starts learning a little bit more about soil health, and man, she's on fire, because again, we see the fact that it's all pieces of the puzzle. And I joke that if farmers were really truly doing their job, work your out of a business, right? I mean, if and I say that jokingly, but if people were eating good quality food and everything they were supposed to do, you guys wouldn't have near the jobs. I mean, and that's a good thing. And I know there's more to it than that, but we joke about that. But it all fits together. Everything she's doing, she sees problems that we can solve over here. So it's like we've got every piece of the puzzle. And that's what I told her. I said, we need to be screaming from the rooftops, to really educate people. Both here, I've got the farm background, she's got the NRT background. To here's the whole, and I got the water side, here's the whole picture, guys. Here's all of it. So I think it's probably the most exciting I've ever been in both my farming industry, with the water, and then with her on what she's doing, because we're like, we've got the answers. We see truth, and that is really something that makes you feel good. You want to pass on.
It's totally true, and there's this old, I believe, Chinese saying something regarding a doctor really only supposed to get paid if their patient stays healthy. And if I could change everything tomorrow and shut down all of these elitist globalists who are making this whole thing operate in this poisonous world, I would. But I'd also put myself out of a job. But I'd be willing to do that because it's for humanity. Because ultimately, if this was all done correct, you're exactly right. I would not have a whole lot of stuff to do, but I would probably find things to do because we know what to do. But really, yeah, I mean, when you get the symbiotic relationship between us and the planet back to where it's supposed to be originally was, some of this stuff just disappears.
Mm-hmm. It does, and it's mind blowing, but it's so simple. It's so simple, and we tend to just complicate stuff so much. If we could just look back and get back to nature a little bit, and boy, I sound liberal now, don't I? If we could get back to the way our grandparents and great grandparents, it's really wild, because a lot of the people in this world that I'm in, the soil health world, they try to look for those old books, look for those 100, 200-year-old books, and that's where, just like NRT stuff, this is not new stuff. It's just imagine somebody was able to put it together and actually get the scientific side to come along with it and say, oh wow, this is why it works. Our grandparents didn't know why they did this, but now we've got the science that says, oh, this is why, and this is how it works.
I agree 100%. So as we close this out now, tell us a little bit lastly about you and your wife are actually writing some blogs and some articles for a magazine, I believe, correct?
We are. It's Beef Producer Magazine, so it's a farm magazine, and and I'm sorry I don't have the website, but you can Google our name or Eric Fuchs and connecting the dots, and I've written a lot before just on water quality, and then when the guy, our editor, saw Leanne and some of the stuff she was doing, he said, I want you guys to write an article together or write a blog together. So we get published in quite a few different farm magazines, but we try to write every 2 weeks, and also on I've got a Facebook page on Fuchs Farms, and we're starting to try to do some videos on what we've been talking about on water infiltration. We're going to start planting some of these crops. So if people want to look, we're going to try to put enough videos to kind of show a progression of what we're doing and how we're improving on things. And so always looking for suggestions. Always would love to be able to talk to people, because it's really neat hearing different aspects, different people, what they think, what the problems are. Because but yeah, the blog has really been good. Leanne's been doing a wonderful job introducing herself as a new farm girl, so it's been really fun.
Awesome. And again, so people can follow you and check out what you're doing. I'm gonna make it so you have to produce some videos now. I want you have some information. You got to start putting out some content. What is the Facebook page again that they can go to?
It's Fuchs Farms, or Riverbend Farms, Fuchs Farms. You put any of those words in right there, and you'll get it.
Awesome. We'll actually drop a link below so that everyone can get to it.
Yeah, and I'll put the link on there for the blog as well too. So it's Beef Producer Connecting the Dots is the name of the blog, but I can put that on there too.
Awesome. Eric, man, hour flies by quickly with so much information. I appreciate everything you gave tonight.
I have really enjoyed this. Anytime, if you have a certain topic, or if people, you get some feedback and they want to talk more about just glyphosate or just GMOs or just water, I would love to come back again. I enjoy this. It's a lot of
have you back, and we can definitely talk about a whole bunch of topics. So again, having someone who knows this side of the world, because I study off and on it, but I'm obviously not as in depth as you are. I would love to have you come in and get some opinions and just data behind what's going on and the actual facts, so people aren't just taking confusion.
Yes, yeah, and I appreciate what you guys do. I tell you what, this NRT thing and what I've seen with Leanne, you guys are doing miracles every day, and it has been mind-blowing to me what you guys are doing. So appreciate all these videos you're doing and the word you're getting out as well.
Absolutely. Eric, thank you again for being on Revolution Health tonight. Everybody, do me a favor, go share this everywhere. You know, a lot of times we have doctors and practitioners on here, and they have good information, but man, health goes back to the farm. It goes back to the water, what we ingest, and people like Eric who have this scientific data. You know, doctors don't always keep up to date, whether it's a natural health practitioner like myself or even medical doctors. There's so much coming out all the time that we're constantly going into different directions because we have to get a little bit of everything. But when we have this real factual data that Eric is able to provide from us, like literally on the lines of this world and on the planet, we absolutely love it. So please share this to everybody out there, because this is what's going to save humanity. This is what's going to actually get us to the next level. So Eric, again, thank you so much for being on and providing value to everybody. You have a wonderful night, and thanks everyone for watching tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.